Marcia, welcome to the show. Uh, can't
Thank
tell
you.
you how happy I am to have you on my podcast today, Marcia. Uh, how are you doing?
Um, Actually, just getting over that awful flu that's been
Mm,
going around. So I'm really happy to be here and have some energy to be with
mhm.
you. It always,
Thank you.
yeah, it feels so good, doesn't it, when we get over an illness
Mm,
and go, wow, this is what it feels like. So
mm,
I'm
mm.
grateful for health today.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Marcia. Pleasure hearing you today. And let's dive into some conversation. Yeah.
Okay.
Uh, I know I was listening to one of your podcasts and listening to you talking to somebody about coaching, and you said, uh, that thinking is the enemy of the coach. And that got me thinking, how is that so? So tell me a little bit
Mhm.
about that. Yeah.
I think it's a natural progression with all coaches that uh, first off, we have to unlearn not just how we interacted with people in the past, but who we are and what value we think we give. Many of us come to coaching, from the training world, from counseling, from advising, consultancy. And so to be able to make the shift of, um, I'm not an expert here, I'm just a thinking partner, that's difficult in the first place.
Mm,
So really working on making that shift. But then they learn coaching skills. So the whole focus on being really good at my skills is I have to remember to do this. I have to remember to ask this. And so they're in their head and then they miss things in the
mm,
coaching session. So I always say, wherever you are on the path, you're practicing your skills, but when you're with people that you're coaching, you put the skills back here. Trust that you know enough by being present and caring about them that something great will occur. Because every time you go into your brain thinking, well, what's the question I need to ask here? You break presence. So,
mm,
it affects the trust and safety. And
mm,
like I said, you'll miss things that are important that they say.
mm. And interesting. I mean, you miss things and you miss on the being present with your client.
Hmm.
Then the question is really, how do you learn to be present and not think so much?
You know, it really is. When you talk about a transformation, change happens. I do
Mm,
this differently now, but a transformation takes time.
mm,
And it's always a little weird and uncomfortable at first. Like, what do you mean not think?
mm, mm,
And you just got to keep practicing at it and getting better at noticing. I'm in my
mm,
head. Can I release that? And that practice then over time becomes a mental habit.
mm,
Um,
mm,
and 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 to know that when I'm fully present with you, with an open mind, my open heart with compassion and my open gut with courage to share with you what's really important, even if you may not like it.
mm,
there there's a research now that shows it's in the therapy world. It's called therapeutic presence or the polyvagal theory, that
mm,
when I have an open mind, not
mm,
thinking, open heart and open gut, that it creates the psychological safety, even on Zoom, that's
mm,
necessary for the person to feel comfortable with you, to bond with you, and to be vulnerable with you, that it just feels more like a conversation than you're doing something to me. So it's an
mm,
essential part of having coaching be successful, to be fully open and receiving whatever they give you and no judgment and just offering back the key things you hear,
mm,
because that's so important for people to look at their thinking in a way they can't do for themselves, outside of themselves, when they hear you say it. And
mm,
how many
mm,
times when you then say it, they'll smile and it's like, yeah, I said that.
mm,
And the
mm,
recognition even of a flaw, takes the power away from it, that we can
mm,
then move forward.
mm, mm. Interesting. So you don't have to really think, you rather have to offer it back to what you've
Offer
heard.
it back. We
Yeah.
make
Yeah.
coaching way too hard.
Yeah. So how one learns to recognize what to offer back.
Yeah. Well, that really comes out of deepening your presence. It's people
Mm,
always ask me that. How did you know that
mm,
was the key thing? And it's the knowing that comes from the wisdom centers in your body, not necessarily your brain. That
mm,
when I'm fully open, not only do you feel safe, but I pick up your energy.
mm,
I mean, we're mammals. We pick up energy all the time, but we don't pay attention.
mm,
And so I'm really, I'm listening to you, but as you're saying things, and if you say a keyword, before I even reflect it, look at the importance, I might even say, what do you mean by that? Even if somebody says, I need more confidence when I go into this meeting, well, what is confidence to you in this moment? So words that are about emotions or doubts,
mm,
that of what's going on, or even assumptions about why things are occurring. Those are the key elements that you would pick up, but you're going to feel those are key elements. There's going to be a little emotion attached to the words when they say it.
mm, mm,
And sometimes it's at the very end of a paragraph, they'll say it under their breath. They'll say something like, yeah, but you know what? I don't really care because I'm leaving soon.
mm,
Or, but that's never going to happen. It's always going to be the same. They'll say
mm,
something like that, and you want to grab that. So if you've already, decided what their problem is, you're going to miss those little mumblings that are really the important pieces.
mm, mm.
Mhm.
They're really listening,
Yeah,
yeah, actively and picking up those words to offer back.
yeah. Mhm.
And therefore, that really requires us to be present so that you can listen.
Totally.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah.
And Marcia, you also mentioned about courage, being
Mm.
courageous in the conversation. Yeah. Uh, Talk to me about that. How, as coaches, we need to be courageous.
Yeah. Well, most, in my experience, most coaches come from uh, a profession where they were there to help people,
Mm,
so they tend to be heart people. So it's easier for them to open their heart. But when it comes for them uh, to share something that may be uncomfortable with the client, um, they don't have the courage to do it. And, I always, like when I mentor and I'll hear something that was really important, I said, did you notice that shift in their emotion when they said that? And they often say yes. And I said, well, why didn't you share that? Well, I didn't want to make them, feel bad about it.
mm,
I'm
mm,
like, this is why I wrote two books back, The Discomfort Zone, that
mm,
often that discomfort is what's necessary to learning, to
mm,
unlearn what I thought I knew, and to learn something new. It's not always comfortable. That's okay. Our job
mm,
is not to help them to feel better. Our job is to help them to see better. So share it. So
mm,
that does mean you've got to have the courage to say what you thought. And in fact, I was doing a demo the other day, and the guy was very technical and in a lot of what he was saying. But then he said something that um, I don't even know what he called it. He had some slang in there that was very real technical based, and then he was going around and this and that. I mean, and I just, I said to him, I said, that was kind of convoluted what you shared with me.
mm.
But then I asked the question, what do you mean? It was like tech deficit or something like that. What do you mean by that? And he laughed and he
Mm,
says, yeah, okay. And afterwards somebody said, that was really something when you said that,
mm,
and I said, that's just what came up for me. I mean, it just felt like it was kind of disconnected, and he was just throwing something out there to defend his
mm,
belief,
mm,
and it just didn't make sense to me. So I
mm,
just
mm,
shared. I just shared it. It just
mm,
came, that's what came out,
mm,
and they
mm,
were like, wow. And that really did make
mm,
the difference, that brought him into, instead of defending this, I really need to look at it.
mm, mm.
Mhm.
And it seems that it's really about being intuitive as well in the moment, then. Uh,
I'm
being
sorry.
intuitive and listening to your own
Yeah.
intuitions.
Yeah. Well, and when I started teaching about head, heart, and gut, that's what intuition is. It's
Mm,
when I said the wisdom centers. The gut has, what is it, 500 million neurotransmitters?
mm,
Yeah, I mean that they're not there just to digest your food. They're taking in. The gut is an active processor. The heart
mm,
is as well, but the gut's amazing. And that intuition isn't from outer space, it's from inner space.
mm,
It's, being able to shut down the mind and sense when something's coming up from your heart, from your gut. Um, and just like I said, that convoluted, that didn't come from my head.
yeah. Some time ago, you spoke about discomfort zone, your book that you've written.
Hmm.
And I think these are some of the discomforts that coaches have: not being courageous, not being present,
Hmm.
thinking
Hmm.
so much that what's the next question?
Hmm.
So if you were to tell me, for a beginner coach, what is a discomfort zone that they generally have, from
Mm.
your experience of, coaching and training so many people, what are the common discomforts you find?
Um, Sometimes coaches have this belief that they have to make people feel happy or more
Mm,
confident, or it's got to be this, a positive emotion. And so if the client um, experiencing their own discomfort and even tears, coaches get very uncomfortable with that. Instead of just saying, emotions are just a common human experience. And to me, every emotion means they just saw something different,
mm,
and just holding the space with compassion, being still, and then asking, would you just share with me what has come up for you? you know and it's amazing uh, that if we don't, please don't jump in and say, oh, it's okay, don't feel that way, you're okay, blah blah blah. Don't do that. You make
yeah.
them weak. And
Mm,
especially if you're coaching live, don't just grab a Kleenex and give it to them. you know
mm, mm,
it's like, don't make people feel wrong for an emotion they feel.
mm,
And if they say, oh, I'm sorry, and it's like, it just, that's okay. So again, share with me what's coming up for you now. So
mm,
helping them to realize that the emotion is an important thing instead of a
mm.
weakness. I think that's
Right.
the most difficult thing for coaches to deal with people's emotions. So it's not just reflecting words. You also
Mm,
want to reflect any shifts in emotions.
mm,
When they got really like, yeah, but that, changed their view, or they looked away and thought about something. Something changed there, you know.
mm,
And just to say, when you looked away, as if you were thinking about this in a different way, would you share with me what's going on?
mm,
To notice those shifts, because that's really important. And oftentimes they don't, the client doesn't notice this on their own, that
mm,
something just was different.
mm,
So the reflection I've come to learn in all of my writing and researching, it's the reflection that's even more
mm,
important than the question. The question usually follows
mm,
the reflection. And that's what makes the question powerful. Even if, what does this mean to you when that happened? Or first you said you didn't want to do this, and now you said, no, I guess I should.
Mm,
So, you know, so what's going on? What is it that you really want to
mm,
have happen that's not happening now?
mm.
Mm-hmm.
So the ability of handling emotion and then also
Mm-hmm.
being able to reflect back, not just the words, but the energy and emotions and
Yeah.
all of that.
Yeah.
Marsha, you mentioned that, you know, when coaches are not able to handle emotions, they make a client feel that they're weak.
Yeah.
Yeah. How does that happen?
Well, we've been doing that all our lives, when
Mm,
people have an emotion, it's like, so we want to hug them and tell them it's okay. And
yeah.
that's fine if it's your friends, but
Mm,
not your client.
mm,
It's so funny. I've been teaching coaching in China for what, 14 years now. And that's their habit is to jump up and hug the person. And I'm like, don't
mm,
touch.
mm,
Don't
mm,
touch. That it's they don't need that in the moment. You're not there to heal them, you're there to coach them. So again, the practice is just hold stillness and silence, care about them. If you feel any tension in your body because of what's occurring, breathe into the tension and release it. Come back to feeling compassion. And all emotions have an arc. There's the trigger, there's the intensity, and then it
mm,
starts to subside. And if you're
mm,
fully present with them, you're going to feel when their emotions starting to subside. And that's the moment you say, would you be willing to share with me what you are now seeing?
mm,
But you got to stay with them. And
mm,
again, that releasing any tension in your body is critical, because when you feel uncomfortable, there's something in your body, and it's different for different people. It may be your gut, could be your breathing in your chest, it could be the back of your neck. You have to notice tension and release it so you can be present again.
mm, mm. It's really the time which is important, right? I mean, giving time and then utilizing time to ask a question at the
Mhm.
right time.
Yeah. Well, there's two things to that. Yes, you stay present so you can really pick up what's important and give it back to them.
Mm,
Um, but if the client, sometimes we give them too much time. I've had coaches say to me, "Yeah, but I have to fully listen to their story." After so many minutes, if they start repeating what they're
mm,
saying, you don't have to hear the whole thing, and you certainly don't have to hear the history.
mm,
Then it's really okay to
mm,
ask for permission to interrupt,
mm,
because I don't want them circulating. There's no purpose for that. Or
mm,
if they're going way too far in their past, I might say, would it be okay if we could stop for just a second? Um, I'm really wanting to focus on, what's occurring right now, and how is this impacting what you really want for yourself? Could we stay here in this moment and determine what you want and what's stopping you?
mm,
And so I don't need to know that what happened in when they were a child, and so
mm,
you can elegantly do that without
mm,
having to hear everything.
mm,
And again, and when they start circulating or going off in another direction, to say, could we stop for a minute? Can you ask for permission, and then you give them the purpose? I just
mm,
want to make sure where we're going, because we started talking about this and now you're talking about this. I want to make sure I know what's most important to you.
mm,
So, yes, we give them space and we listen to them, but when they start going off in a different direction,
mm,
or just telling you the same thing they keep telling you, then it's okay to ask for permission to interrupt.
mm. Yeah, and in my trainings, I do call it elegant interruptions. Yeah, you can
Oh,
always
good.
create. Yeah. It can always create
I
them.
love that. That was
Yeah,
given to me as well.
yeah. So yeah. So Marcia, you've written so many books, and one of the book which I really, really enjoyed was, and by the way, I've read this book so far, and that is Coach the Person and Not the Problem. And I think I have evolved in my practice reading that book.
No,
So
thank you.
first of all, thank you for writing such a wonderful book. Um, you know, what I generally find is that most of the coaches, when we start our journey, we're very focused on the problem and not the person, a consultative head, or our decision making process on behalf of our client, and then wanting to suggest them what is the right action that they can take. A lot of times we just focus on the problem. How do you think a coach can shift their mindset, their thinking,
Yeah.
from thinking about the problem to the person?
Yeah. Well, first I want to say that I've had a number of people that have sort of quoted me that said she's wrong, you got to help them solve a problem because what's the purpose? And I say it's not about forgetting the problem. It really is coach the person to solve their problems.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
the problem becomes the context.
Hmm.
The question all coaches should be asking is, what's truly stopping this smart person from getting what they want?
Hmm.
And so if you're just focused on the problem, you know, I worked for tech companies for 11 years, and they always had this thing, if you just look at the problem, you're not going to get, it's just going to reoccur. You're going to solve this little problem, then it'll occur somewhere else. So they
Hmm.
said you had to do a what was it, a deep dive analysis.
Hmm.
They called it something else, but I can't remember. But it was, you have to go underneath, you have to go underneath, you have to find what is the source
Hmm.
of the what has occurred. Well, it's the same thing in coaching. If I just solve your problem, which they could probably do on their own, um, it doesn't create sustainable change.
Hmm.
So, and when I say they could probably do on their own, is,
Hmm.
is that's why the question is, what's stopping this smart person from solving their problem? That's the
Hmm.
great value I give them,
Hmm.
And so, one of the first things is to look at, when you solve this problem, what are you hoping to have?
Hmm.
So we really do need the agreement is that we agree to what the person wants to change or create. And
Hmm.
please don't ever ask that as the first question. So what do you want out
Hmm.
of our time together? They're just going to tell you the problem.
Hmm.
you
Right.
know
Hmm.
right, and so then you're going to focus on the problem. You just ask him, so what is it you're bringing to our talk today? What's been on your mind? What's your challenge? And
Hmm.
let them start talking about it. You're going to start to hear, you know the 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 belief system that is framing their problem, the shoulds everybody's telling them, that
Hmm.
they're worried about judgment, the assumptions about, but if I do this, this will happen, the assumptions about the future when they don't know what the future
Hmm.
is. So if as they start to tell their story, when we listen to what's really stopping this person, that's the key elements. That's
Hmm.
coaching them to recognize what's getting in the way of them solving their own problem.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because if you think you're just problem solving with them, it's like, again, it's just a surface level uh, uh, solution, and
Hmm.
you're not really giving them the benefit of what coaching can do. That's your
Hmm.
value. Coaches that stick with the problem say, yeah, but what value am I if I don't do that or I don't give them advice? Um, but they came to you for coaching, and hopefully, in your agreement up front, in your relationship agreement, you told them what you were going to do.
Hmm.
I'm very clear with potential clients that, you know what, I'm not going to give you all kinds of books to read and assignments to do. When you come to me, I'm going to help you think through a challenge so you can see your solution, because I believe you have the capability of doing that. And I'm just going to help you really think through this problem in a way you haven't done yet.
Mm.
You know, and I think that that's the great value, and my clients all think so too.
Right. And in fact, I have experienced it, and I think focusing on the on the person allows the person to be more reflective
Mm-hmm.
about themselves. I think they go
Yeah.
inward and they think
Mm-hmm.
about themselves differently if you
Yeah.
focus on them. Yeah. So I
Well,
think it
and they
also.
can't do that on their
Hmm,
own, as many
hmm,
neuroscientists have written
hmm,
about, that
hmm,
we don't analyze our thinking well on our own. You
hmm,
know, the classic books, Thinking Fast and Slow, we don't do
hmm,
it.
hmm,
We're
hmm.
slowing them down to think in a way
Right.
they won't do for themselves, you know, or
Hmm,
when neuroscience is right, do we really have free will because our brain is making decisions for us?
hmm,
Our brain stops us from pulling apart our thinking because it
hmm,
doesn't really want us to look at who we are and what we're doing in a negative way. So
hmm,
we need someone outside of ourselves, you know,
hmm,
which I call a thinking partner. I've heard
hmm.
it an external thought disruptor, you
Hmm.
know, which really helps us think in a way we cannot do for ourselves.
Right. Right.
Hmm.
It's really about creating that container for them
Hmm.
to think.
To
You know,
jump in.
yeah, yeah,
But they
and
have to
pull.
feel safe with you before
Right.
they'll do that, before they'll
Right.
jump in the middle with you. Yeah.
Right. And safety, I think, is also a very big topic, Marcia, right? In a
Hmm.
coaching conversation.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Talk to me more about safety. How do we create safety so that people can just open up and talk about anything
Yeah.
that they want to talk?
You know, that really is the energy. It's not the words. You can't just say, no, you can trust me and have them
Mm,
believe it. Because again, we are animals and we have to
mm,
feel it from
mm,
you, not just
mm,
what you say.
mm,
And that comes back to all the research around the head, heart, and gut. That the original research by Sherry Geller, Gellar,
mm,
um, in Toronto, when she was researching the impact of therapists that work with trauma patients, and they
mhm,
would work on fully opening their their head with curiosity, their heart with compassion, and their gut with courage. That they would do that visualization before they go in with their clients.
mm,
That energy, you know, that the client would feel, this person is here for me, they're totally open here for me, it brings them in, and they would have the trauma patients speak of their trauma for the first time in their lives. You know, that was the original research she had. She's gone on and done a lot more research, and there's a lot of
mm,
research that has built on her work and others on what they call therapeutic presence. So it really is, when you bring that energy to the space, then people, you know, it triggers their chemistry, you know,
mm,
the oxytocin that wants them to bond, that they bond with you, the serotonin, the dopamine that open their mind to possibilities, but it
mm,
also decreases, you know,
mm,
any of the anxiety that they may have. So
mm,
we have to create a chemical reaction, the biochemistry of coaching, you know, that's
mm.
so critical for them to fully feel safe enough to trust you.
Right.
You know, and so you know, and that's what I'm adding to the new Coach the Person, Not the Problem, and a whole first chapter
Mm,
on you know, the biochemistry of coaching. And you know what? This is what's going to save you, because it's going to be very difficult to replicate this by AI anytime soon.
mm, mm.
So, yeah, since it's an energetic exchange, not a verbal exchange.
I'm going to come back to this energetic exchange that you're talking about. Marcia,
Mhm.
tell me more on. I'm excited now to hear about the second version coming up soon. Tell me more. What else are we going to learn in the book?
Well, you know, I'm going to add that chapter, and of course, I'm going to go through the entire book, you know, just to shift, to show what I've learned. It's
Mm.
always, you know, humbling to go back and read stuff and say, I wrote that. That's not true.
Mm,
You know, because um, And that's a good thing. It means I'm learning and growing. But I will be putting a chapter in at the end. This year, my client and I won the Impact Award from ICF for coaching culture for an emerging corporation. They're from Vietnam.
Yeah.
And so, boy, learned a lot in the process. And especially the application process of what we had to write in order to receive the award. So, got a lot of writing on it already. So, I want to share what was significant
Mm,
in that process with creating a coaching culture. Yeah.
mm, mm.
Mhm.
And and I think you do work with creating a coaching culture with many organizations, right? Big corporations that you work with. Tell us how organizations really are now adapting to coaching culture.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I haven't worked with many. I would say, there have been like five that have fully jumped into the waters. A lot of them come to me saying, I want a coaching culture. Or I recently had a client who I'm going to be teaching their internal coaches, um, some coaching skills. He says, "Yeah, we should apply for that." Well, he's nowhere near ready to
Mm.
apply for that. Just because you've got some coaches in your company doesn't mean you have a coaching culture,
Right,
So when they look at what they have to do, it's a huge investment.
right.
I said, well, the first thing you got to start with is what are you going to measure? It takes 3 years of measurement, whether it's
Mm,
engagement or retention, uh, if you can align it with productivity. Um, you've got to have measurements over three
mm,
years. But then you have to
mm,
include um, not just some internal coaches, but it's kind of a three-pronged thing that the top people get coaching from external people, and the top
mm.
people have to be advocates for coaching, because if they're not, it's not going to happen,
Right,
because
right,
you're not going to get the budget for it,
right.
So they get coaching. You have an internal pool of coaches. You teach a coaching approach to all leaders. But here's also the key: is everyone in the company has to know the value of coaching and even have the possibility of being coached. So
Right.
my client, they even created a platform where anybody, I don't care if you're just cleaning the floors, anyone can go on the platform and request a coach. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily their boss, and say, what they're looking for. And every employee has that, and they
Mm,
all know what it is. So you've got to create, a little video or something to introduce coaching to the environment to get everybody excited, because they need to want to be coached for the
right,
leaders to sustain using a coaching approach in their
right,
conversations. So you see, it's a pretty big investment to
right,
do that.
right.
But that was my client. Their parent company are Japanese. And she said, I'm so happy we won, because we were wondering if they were going to continue giving us the budget,
Right.
And so now they will. So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Mm, mm,
hmm
mm.
It's the measurements that keep it going, though. That's really critical.
Right. And that's how you know that you are sustaining the culture, the coaching
Yes.
culture, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not just a fad.
Right. Right. So, Marcia, I want to go back to what you spoke about, coach the person and not the problem. Yeah. My
hmm
interesting, my favorite topic to speak
hmm
about. And tell me, we was talking about presence now, right? Your coach needs to be present and then
hmm
focus on the client. So how do you really learn to handle emotions when the client is really experiencing some deep emotions? Uh,
Handling your own emotions.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
I mean, really, that's emotional intelligence,
mm-hmm,
and I always recommend coaches to have some training in emotional intelligence. But it comes back to you recognizing tension in your body. Emotions occur in the body before the
mm,
brain. It's not
mm,
like I think this way and I have an emotion. It occurs
mm-hmm,
in the body first. That was the thing that they discovered in 1995, when they were actually able to scan the brain and see how thoughts are processed, they went, oops, we're
mm,
wrong. So
mm,
self-talk is like useless.
mm, mm,
If you want to feel something different, you have to uh, feel it in your body, not just think it. So, first off, is to notice as quickly as you can when something tightens up. And like I said, people have different things. It could be your jaw. I had one woman say, "My ears burn," you know.
mm,
So to know where you tend to feel a little fear, a little discomfort, or frustration, um,
mm,
it's good to know where. But in the moment that you're coaching, just notice these points of tension,
mm,
and as quickly as you can,
mm,
you breathe into to release the tension, because it's not, when we have tension in our body, it decreases our blood flow to the brain. So you can't even think
mm,
as best as you can. So you
mm,
breathe into body, release the tension, and then clear your mind. Clear your mind and drop your awareness to the center of your body, because this is your point of strength, that you've got to really be aware of my center. That helps you clear your mind. And then you can say to yourself one or two emotion words. And so choose these before you go into
mm,
a session. It could be courage and
mm,
compassion. It could be calm
mm,
and patient.
mm,
Whatever it is that you need. So but you have to breathe that into your center, not just think the words.
mm,
So, and that helps you coach from your body. And
mm.
I learned this from doing a program where I had to interview some very top, well-known professional athletes about,
Okay.
so what happens when you're, in that clutch moment and the game depends on you, or depends on this one thing you have to do. And they all said they were taught by sports psychologists to
Mm,
be aware of, only to be aware of what's going on in me from my center. Do not think. They
mm,
don't do self-talk like you're a winner, because then they said something in the back of their head says, no, you're not, you're a loser.
mm,
you know, it's not
mm,
about thinking, it's about feeling your body moving and just being centered and grounded in the moment. And
mm,
that's how they could, get rid of any distractions that
mm,
come into their brain. Just be here now,
mm,
and how do I want to feel in this moment?
mm,
And that's a practice that takes, you should practice it every morning when you wake up. Release any tension, clear your mind, drop your awareness to your center, and say, how do I want to feel today?
mm.
We can practice it, and you can practice
Right,
it throughout the day until it just becomes a habit.
right. And isn't that true for every conversation, Marcia?
Every
Mm.
conversation.
Yeah, I
Especially
think.
every conversation you assume will be difficult.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And conversations are getting difficult because people are all busy these days. Yes,
Yeah.
nobody has got time today.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that one of the great results of our presence is people feel seen. They feel
Mm,
seen, they feel heard, and they feel valued for who they are, what they know. And during the day, we're also busy. We don't give that to people. We
mm,
walk by people in the hallway, kind of smile at them. We don't see them. So
mm,
people aren't feeling seen. And for
mm,
just this moment, this could be the only time of day that they really feel seen. We give them
mm,
that gift. That opens
mm,
them up to us as well.
mm. Yeah. And that's a therapeutic presence, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah.
So,
Mm.
and we call it coaching presence, but that's
Yeah,
what
we
it
call it.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you did speak about mentoring, right? You mentor people. Yeah.
Mm.
How your coaching and mentoring is different.
Well, mentoring is advising.
Okay. Okay.
I may use some coaching in there, like, what were you thinking in that moment?
Mm.
But
Yeah.
according to the ICF, the mentoring is feedback on skills. Um,
Mm,
it's what in most therapy professions they would call supervision. So there's a mix
mm,
up there. We call it mentoring. where I
Mm.
observe you coaching, and we talk about, what worked, and let me give you some ideas of what would make this better.
Mm. Mm.
So, and if it's, I coach for I teach for 5 coaching schools, and if the mentoring is then for their certification, then it's very directed on
Mm.
this what is what you need to do to
Mm.
pass. Yeah,
Yeah.
especially at
And
an MCC.
right, right. I mean, empathy, I think mentoring is at a different level altogether, right? It takes a lot of time to be able to get that recording for MCC.
Well,
Yeah,
that's why it takes so many hours of coaching to be an
right,
MCC.
right.
They haven't changed that. They changed the PCC, which I'm out on on if that's good or bad. What makes you good is to coach,
Right.
and so you have to have that. What is it, 2,500 hours?
Right.
Um, and hopefully you will have developed your presence and not be so much in your head. No, trust that you trust the
Hmm.
coaching process.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
because I do uh, MCC mentoring, and it's interesting. People come to it, but they're like, well, I'm preparing, I'm starting on my journey to MCC, and it's clear to me they're not ready,
Yeah.
but it's fine. I'll just say, here's the things that would be good for you to work
Right.
on this journey to
Yeah.
MCC.
Mm. So, Marcia, I'm going to talk about now something different, and that is your another book, which is I can see in your background as well, breakthrough coaching.
Hmm.
Talk to me a little bit about what is breakthrough coaching uh, from a client perspective this time.
Yeah. Well, that's also somewhat of a misunderstanding that we think, they have to have this big wow
Yeah.
moment somewhere in there. But, I always say that even in the determining what it is they really want that they don't have now at the very beginning, trying to clarify uh, what do you want?
Mm.
What would this decision give you if you were to take the time to plan? What are you looking for as a result of the plan? That lots of times they'll have like they'll
Mm.
have a breakthrough at the very beginning. And I always
Mm.
say sometimes it's just the moment.
Mm.
Duh, of course.
Yeah.
That's a breakthrough too.
Mm.
Yeah. So it's just that all of a sudden they see something different. They have a creative insight, is what it's called. They have an insight like, oh, okay. It could
Mm.
be a smile. It could be they could roll their eyes. They may even feel embarrassed.
Yeah.
You know, that at that moment, that's really a breakthrough because they're now seeing things differently. That's all that
Mm.
is
Mm.
some things in the middle brain
Mm.
disconnected and reconnected, or maybe they're just disconnected and it's like, oh, but I don't know. And then we have to coach them into, okay, so what just came forward? What does that mean to you in terms of what you want to create? Has that
Mm.
changed what you
Mm.
want to create? So we
Mm.
have to catch those, even the little moments, the rolling of the eyes, the little smile, or the gasp. Oh,
Mm.
the sigh because they realize they've been doing something that they knew better, but
Yeah.
kept doing it.
So that's really a breakthrough coaching, something getting connected or disconnected or reconnected. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Right.
also like sorry, go ahead.
No, I was say, but that indicates. See, when we coach, we're coaching the middle brain. When you give them advice, you're coaching the short-term memory and the cognitive brain. But when
Uh-huh.
you give them reflections, they pull up like memories, which are in the middle brain and start connecting things differently. So we're really creative insights. Creativity is in the middle brain. We're
Mm.
actually activating creativity when we
Mm.
coach. And that's
Mm.
why breakthroughs happen up here,
Mm.
not up
Mm.
here.
Talk to me a little bit more about that. So how as coaches are we, you know, bringing in that creativity? I mean, what is happening in the brain?
Well, that's the whole process of reflective inquiry. It's not just about questions. Coaching isn't asking questions.
Mm.
like I said, the reflection is
mm,
often more powerful than the follow-on question. But then you have a follow-on question. Um,
mm,
but as a thinking partner, then they're thinking about their thinking.
mm,
Okay. And so, again, in order to pull up um, whatever brought us to thinking in that way in the moment, they're pulling it out of long term memory, which is in the middle brain. Okay. We want to work with long term memory, not short term.
mm,
And so the reflection actually sends them into the
mm,
creative center where they're like, huh, no, yeah, I don't know, why do I
mm,
think that way? Where did
mm,
that come from? I've been saying this for years. It doesn't make sense, does it? So we need to activate their long-term memory, and
mm,
that's why reflection is so powerful, because it gets into there and they start to pull it up, and when they start seeing something different, it makes reconnections, um, uh, or pulls up an old thought that needs to be strengthened
mm,
um, in that moment. So
mm,
we're dealing with um, different a different set of neurotransmitters and neurons that again can connect, and it's necessarily that um, we're letting something else go, but we're bringing forth something that's even more important. Because you know how it is. It's like we may see the folly of our fear. Like, well, that's crazy. Why am I afraid of that? And then, okay, so how does that apply to you now? How is that useful for you in this moment? And that doesn't mean the fear goes away. It'll show up at some time in the future because it's probably deeply embedded. So, just to then to notice, like, well, look, there it is again, and to be curious about it.
mm,
So we're kind of creating new connections in the brain
mm.
when we
And
coach.
it's more of a new awareness, which probably they've
Yeah.
not noticed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what we're seeking.
Yeah. And I think when people have that awareness, I think they can then make decisions.
Oh, yeah. It's
Yeah.
like oh, okay. Okay, now I see what to do, but you still have to ask them. So tell me what you now see and get
Yeah.
them to
Yeah.
articulate. If they don't articulate the new awareness, it doesn't necessarily embed. So
Hmm.
they must articulate it, so
Hmm.
that's why you ask them. So, just in that moment when you made that, you
Hmm.
smiled and rolled your eyes, what came up for you? You've got to help them articulate because it's often not a fully formed sentence.
Hmm.
When they have this, they just see something. So get them to say it, to speak it,
Hmm.
which makes
Hmm.
all the difference in embedding it in the brain.
Hmm. So by articulating, you are clarifying for themselves and for yourself,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
then
for
maybe
both of us. Yeah.
solidifying their
Yeah.
awareness.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Hmm. Hmm. And that's when I think people feel motivated to take actions. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And being become accountable to what they said that they will do.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yes. They're far more motivated when they're like, they have a new awareness. It's theirs. It's in the discovery process. It activates the brain. When you
mm,
tell them what to do, it pacifies their brain. They have less brain activity. So we want to
mm,
activate the brain,
mm,
because then they're like, oh, okay. And it's so amazing when I say, so now what are you going to do with that? What's the next step? And they
mm,
say it, and I say, okay, by when? That's an important question to ask when people say they're going to do something. When are you going to do it? Because that ensures the commitment. And they often say later today or tomorrow, and I'm like,
yeah,
great, and that
yeah,
shows me, the
uh,
confidence they have.
yeah.
There's truly the indication that you
Mm,
got where you needed to go.
mm.
Yeah.
And Marcia, from your experience now, and I'm now curious to hear from you some of the questions that you think really work all the time.
Um, I don't like questionless, because questions
Yeah.
usually come from the spontaneous interaction.
Mm, mm,
But again, oftentimes, if I'm using a reflection, just asking, what does that mean to you? How does that
mm,
relate to what you want to happen now instead of
mm,
what's going on? So,
mm,
having uh, the reflection, asking what that means to them, how that relates to them. Um,
mm,
but even asking when they say, what I really want is a better relationship with my boss. Well, what does that look like? I
mm,
need to see a vision, a picture of what that is, what it means to them, because that's
mm,
better for them,
mm,
in solidifying going forward. But we need to agree on that picture. If I assume I understand that what you want without seeing it, I'm making a wrong assumption.
mm.
Yeah, and
Or at least that's an assumption, right? We don't know.
yeah. We don't
Yeah.
know, and
Yeah.
it's difficult when you've had a client for a very long time not to be
Mm,
making those assumptions, not to giving them the benefit of the doubt that today
yeah.
they're a different person than the last time you saw them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, being a coach also, you could be different than how you were last time as a
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
is there a tip of maybe articulating questions clearly for coaches?
Articulating the question.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, creating questions.
Well, I think the word articulating is really important.
Mm,
Please
mm,
don't a question should be very concise.
mm,
Don't start by saying, well, I'm not sure if this is right, or, give some excuse. Don't do that.
mm,
Or this just came up for me. Just ask the question and then don't explain the question. I coaches have this habit of like asking the question, then asking it another way, then asking it another way, and explaining why they're asking a question, and that's all useless. Just
yeah.
ask the question and shut up. And if they
Yeah.
don't understand it, say, okay, let me ask it a different way.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But you're
Yeah.
confusing them by all that talk.
Mm,
And so the skill is being very concise. And it's interesting because a lot of times I teach quite a few students in Asia, and they're always, but you don't understand us. We're just not direct, that
mm,
whole thing. I said, I'm not
yeah.
asking you to confront them. I'm just
Yeah.
saying, can you be more concise?
Right.
That's all. You can do that.
Yeah.
So they have a confusion around direct communication.
Mm,
They think it's confrontation and not um, just I'm curious. Yeah,
mm. And I say, cut the crap, ask the question.
yeah. Very well said. Yeah,
Get to the point. Yeah.
get to the
Uh,
point. Mm.
Marcia, any advice that you have for our listeners uh, from your experience, how they can really uh, reduce the learning curve as a coach?
Yeah. Well, first, accept wherever you are today is good.
Mm,
Whether
mm,
you're just starting out or, you know, I mean, I always tell people when they say, "Oh, you're so amazing as a coach." I said, "I've been doing it for over 30 years." I mean, in the ICF way. Prior to
mm,
coaching, to knowing what coaching was, I think I did some coaching, but I was probably more advising as a trainer. So wherever you are today is good,
mm,
and just to remember to come to the session just caring about your client. And with the mindset of I am here for you. I'm not here
mm,
to perform or for you to think I'm a great coach. I'm just here for you to help you think.
mm,
Remember that as you go in. That's your great value.
mm,
Because coaches, that's their biggest thing. They keep questioning, am I a value to my client? Because I don't have the necessary skills and I'm not giving them advice.
mm,
Remember that if you can help them think, that's the greatest gift
mm,
that you're giving people, because they'll carry that forward into thinking about other things and
mm,
remembering the gift you gave them. So
mm,
you're good wherever you are,
mm,
stepping onto this path.
mm. I mean, just accept it and know
Hmm.
what you need to learn and continue learning. You'll,
Right.
yeah.
Right. When I look back at the testimonials in my first couple of years, I don't know what I was doing, but everybody loved it.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, I really got to talk through it. And, because they had a safe space to talk.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's, the gift that you're giving them. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's the greatest value. If people can just feel themselves and talk,
Yeah. Yeah.
nothing more than that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
You're not there to
eh,
fix them. You're not there to heal them. You're
right.
there just to help them think.
Right. And sometimes I think because of our training and our education, we want some tangible results and tangible, I
Hmm.
think, discussions around the action items. If we don't get that, I think we feel that we've not given any value.
Hmm.
Uh, we've not
Well,
created a value. Yeah.
yeah, but you're going to get that at the end.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
I always cycle back to at the very end. Okay, so great. So now what are you going to do? What's your next step?
Hmm.
And they'll
Hmm.
often give me three.
Hmm.
Okay, so what's first? When are you going to do that? So what are you going to do by when is really
Uh,
important. Could anything get in the way of you achieving what you want?
right.
Or if it's based on somebody else, they're going to have a conversation with someone. If it doesn't turn out like you hope it will, what will you then do? So
Hmm.
those are standard questions. That's how you wrap
Right.
it up.
Right.
So
Right.
you do have some action commitments. Even if they say, boy, I have to think about this some more, just say, well, what does that look like to you? Thinking
Hmm.
about it, do you have to do something to ensure that you will take that time?
Hmm.
So I still get a commitment to action. That's, the final competency, ensuring
Hmm.
progress. That's necessary.
Hmm. It's really about being patient, right? And you ultimately get there.
You're going to
Don't
get
worry.
there. Well, it's about
Yeah.
trust.
Yeah.
Trust
Hmm.
the process of coaching. If you
Hmm.
can coach their thinking and they can see some other things, then they're going to have
Hmm.
some actions to take.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Uh,
So you're
I
far
mean,
more at the very called the bookends of coaching. Up front, you got to know, where are we going? What is it you really want to have
hmm.
that you don't have now? So a little
Hmm.
bit more specific with your questions. What does that look like?
Hmm.
Why is that important to you now? Some very
Hmm.
specific questions once you get the picture.
Hmm.
And then you coach them to what's stopping them from creating
Hmm.
this. And when they
Hmm.
determine what that is, then you move back into more of a deliberate place
Hmm.
of asking, so when are you going to do that? By when? What could get in the way?
Hmm.
Yeah.
And what did you say, Marcia? I missed the word you said. For something you said?
For
Uh,
the bookends?
okay, bookends. Okay, four
Bookends.
bookends.
Yeah, yeah. They
Yeah.
hold the books together. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So it's
Interesting.
kind of more formulaic
Hmm.
in that sense. But
Hmm.
it also allows you to be present. I don't have to
Hmm.
think about a bunch of competencies. I
Hmm.
know
Hmm.
when I'm starting out, I really want to know, what is it you want that you
Hmm.
don't have now or you want
Hmm.
to change. I know I'm coaching to that.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then what's getting in the way is what we're going
Hmm.
to talk about. I'm going to notice things as you say it that, oh, that could be getting in the way. And
Hmm.
then I know at the end that I need some commitment. That's all.
Hmm.
That's all I
Hmm.
have to remember. And then I can stay present.
Yeah. And that's so simple way of explaining it. Yeah. And
Hmm.
can be made so complicated by
So
beginners and
complicated.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's also about letting go of
Yeah.
your own thinking, your own
Hmm.
attachments, your own belief system when you're listening to people.
Yeah.
Mm,
Well, just letting go of thinking.
mm.
but judgment, which is your attachment. Judgment also shows up in the body as an emotion. Judgment's an emotion. It's not an opinion.
Mm,
Um, that uh, if I again notice any tightness, if you say something to me,
mm,
I'll tighten up. And I learned this because I do get to coach in places where they bring up my judgments. So, again, I've been coaching for a coaching school in China for 14 years. And often when I do demos, they'll say something that is totally against my value system, but has nothing to do with the coaching. So it's like, whoop, there it is. Mine's a solar plexus. I feel it right heavy in my chest. And I just have to release, let it go, and come back to caring about this person in front of me. You know, they're a good person. Who cares about their politics or whatever? It has
mm,
nothing to do with this, you know, or whatever it is that would trigger a judgment that I've held, a value
mm,
I've held for since I was a child. Um, you know, so just letting that it's releasing the tension again, so you can come back and be present. You know, and that's what assumptions are often based on judgments, you know, and
mm,
coming back to
mm,
I don't know. I'm here for you.
mm, mm.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So assumptions are based on judgment. So we assuming, so I'm kind of visualizing what you're saying, Marcia. So we
Yeah.
assuming something and then we creating judgment in the process,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Well,
Mm.
no, the judgment is an emotion. It happens before the thought.
Okay.
Okay.
Mm,
So
mm,
something happens in, you know, because you've got values and you've got all this, there's
mm,
a, you know, there
mm,
really is a tension in the body that
right.
goes, "Ooh," you
Mm,
know, like, that doesn't feel good to me because it's against my value system. And then you have the thought. If you can
mm,
catch it, the sooner you can catch tension in your body, the sooner you can catch it before it actually impacts your thoughts. That's the
yeah.
great bit of
Yeah.
doing this practice. So I
Yeah.
always say go places that trigger your judgment, you know, like the airport or the grocery store, or for me, my sister. She's great practice for me. Have lunch with
Yeah.
my sister, you know, I'll catch my judgment, you know, because she's the
Yeah.
bigger sister and she knows everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and she's helped me. She's my great teacher and
Yeah.
helped me recognize my judgment, let it go, and just come back and love my sister.
Mm.
So,
And that's what I say even in my program. When people say, how do I become a better coach? I tell people, start to coach people you know the most.
yeah, that's good. That's
Yeah.
good
Yeah.
to realize what you need to
Right.
let go of knowing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Marcia, it was a pleasure talking to you today
Thank you.
and a really, really wonderful conversation. So much of learning. And I've made my own notes, by the way, in talking to you
Good.
today. We'll catch up again with you, Marcia.
Okay.
Thank you for your time today, and I'm looking forward. By the
Thank
way,
you. Thank
tomorrow
you.
I'm going to catch up with you on the
Oh,
webinar.
good, good. And
Yeah,
the mic worked this whole time,
yeah, I
right?
did very well.
Okay, good, good.
Yeah,
Because I'm so
yeah.
worried about tomorrow, but it seems to be working. So good.
It's
Thank you.
working very good, and all the best to you, Marcia, for
Okay.
tomorrow.
All
I'll see
right.
you
See you
there.
tomorrow.
Yeah, bye
Okay.
bye.
Thanks. Bye.